morning. Hopefully, y'all can hear me. A little technical problems this morning, and it seems like I would guess the teacher down the hall is keeping you guys late once again. So I think we'll wait for people to check in. The subject today is the free ride is over for student loans. Good morning, Carrie. You guys hear me okay? Having a little bit of technical difficulties. Just a few seconds. Okay. All right. Again, I'll have to talk to him in the faculty lounge next time. So, all right. So I will wait until everybody else checks in. Hear you loud and clear. Good. Never quite know. So yeah, I know that Linda McMahon has said that they're starting to collect all the student loans that have been, I guess they have been collecting since 2020 when all this kind of stuff started. And we know what this means. So anyways, I think I'll wait until that comes. This is kind of, I guess, goes hand in glove with what Ben and Michael and I are talking about on Fridays in the state of education. Me being a former teacher, this is my field, one of my fields, that I'm a jack of many trades, master of none. Okay. I have not really ever stuck to one career in my life. I've bounced around from printing to sales, machine sales, or automotive sales, I guess it was, and to education, and then into video and audio production, renting a studio and audio. Oh, there's AC. Okay. So is the classroom out? Kids are in the hall. Cool. That's not the whole saying. What is the whole saying? Jack of all trades, master of none. What's the rest of it? So we'll wait for that. So anyways, I will go ahead and share the video that I wanted to start with. This is Victor Davis Hanson and Mike Rowe.
Not only is the demographic shrinking, there's fewer students, but the costs are going up above the rate of inflation. The students are not getting any means to pay back the loans, and the universities are no longer meritocratic. And that's even going into medical school, law school, business school. And so a lot of people are saying, I want my child to go get skills. I want him to go to a trade school. I want him to go to a community college. And the elite now, believe it or not, I get a call twice a week. Victor, I'm not going to send my kid to Harvard, Yale, where I went, or Stanford. Is it Hillsdale? Is it Pepperdine? Is it St. Thomas Aquinas? Where do I send my child? Or do I send them to University of Oklahoma, Oklahoma State? And so I'm very confident that there is a revolutionary movement in education to get rid of this toxic, I have a bunch of letters after my name, therefore I'm educated, therefore I'm an expert. And what the universities have done is almost criminal, to put us, the taxpayers, on a $1.7 trillion exposure so they can raise their rates of tuition above the rate of inflation. And they're not accountable, and their students they're not competitive compared to other universities. So
we're in such
I think that's not sustainable. And what you're talking about is very important, because that's kind of what you're kind of leading, that people are going to look toward
listing.
Okay. All right. So with the ads today too, but that was Victor Davis Hanson talking to Mike Rowe. All right. So here's the rest of the saying. Jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully that's me. I had never heard that. So good. Thank you. Carrie. All right, so that was Mike Rowe and Victor Davis Hanson. And Victor Davis Hanson is a fellow. He's an egghead, is what he. But he's really down to earth, kind of very conservative, rational egghead. He goes on after this to say that he's a professor at Stanford and also at Hillsdale College. And if you don't know Hillsdale College is, they advertise all the time on stuff that folks like us listen to, but they're the ones that do not take federal money. They have no federal money, and they didn't want the strings that came attached with federal money. So I work construction. There was a guy there who told me he had a college degree. I told him that's great, but it doesn't help us here. Yeah. So, and that's interesting that a guy who teaches at Stanford, and Victor Davis Hanson, you guys, if you don't know him, you really should know him. He lives in Central California. And as a matter of fact, if I get time to it, he made a list of all the things that are going on in California now. How Gavin Newsom is really attempting to destroy. It's the only thing you can think of is they're attempting, in their Marxist worldview, they're trying to break down the institutions of this state, and somehow remake from their own image out of the ashes. Is the only thing I think of. Literally the ashes. California, if you do some of the things that Gavin Newsom has done, like we saw early this year, there will be ashes. There will be nothing but ashes. Yeah. So Carrie, good. So, Linda McMahon, brought out this, she's the head of the Department of Education, and they put out a white paper, you would call it, something like that, about how they're starting to collect the student debts that hadn't been collected since 2020. So as soon as all this happened, they stopped collecting student money. And even at one point, President Biden tried to forgive everyone's student debt. And I think they hold, it says right here today, if you guys can see it, I'm going to highlight it. Today, 42.7 million borrowers owe more than $1.6 trillion in student debt. And that's held by the Department of Education, because years ago, President Obama nationalized student loans. I think before that, you had to go privately, or somehow it was a regional thing where you would get a student loan. I never got a student loan, so I don't know. And our kids did not, from various circumstances, we never went the student loan route. But so that's held by the federal government, basically. And then and that's a big enough problem right there. If it was just that we're owed 1.6 trillion, which I suppose is an asset. Whenever you hold a debt, someone owes you, that's an asset you have. So $1.6 trillion is out there in student loans. But more than 5 million borrowers have not made a monthly payment for over 300 for a year and sit in default. Many of them more than 7 years, and 4 million borrowers are late in stage of delinquency, which is about 3 to 6 months, 91 to 180 days. And as a result, there could be almost 10 million borrowers in default in a few months. And when this happens, almost 25% of the federal student loan portfolio will be in default. Okay, so only 38% of borrowers are in repayment and current on their student loans. So almost 1.9 million borrowers have been unable to even begin repayment because of a processing pause put in place by the previous administration. So Biden tried to make it so student loans didn't have to be repaid, which the Supreme Court, they challenged it in the Supreme Court. Trump challenged it. Supreme Court said that's not illegal. He doesn't have the right to do that. So now all these student loans are coming due, and all the young people that we have co-signed for, I don't remember co-signing for anyone's student loans, but this is now coming due. So all the students that borrowed this money to go to college, who haven't even begun. Some of them haven't even begun to pay it back. Some of them have been in pause and haven't paid it in 5 years. $1.6 trillion is coming due. And how is this going to work? How are these young people who have been sold a bill of goods? Like Victor David Hanson said, it's been criminal what the colleges have done in taking all this money. When Obama federalized this, it gave every incentive in the world for those colleges to raise their prices and to dumb down their curriculum. It became like an entitlement program to the colleges. I don't even think they had the students in mind. This was just basically the federal government saying to colleges, hey, we'll give you all this money. Just take these students, teach them something, teach them anything you want. And actually, if you teach them our worldview, if you teach them all this crazy DEI stuff and every other progressive Marxist, semi-Marxist idea you can, all the better for us, because we're the ones running it. That's our worldview, our ideology, right? That's the change we're trying to make to this country. So we'll take this $1.6 trillion, we'll give it to the universities, which gives the universities every incentive to rake in that free money and push the agenda that the federal government wants, that the people in power want. And for most of the past 15 years, 17 years, yeah, except for one little brief 4-year window, it was the leftist Marxist people that were in charge, and they loved what the universities were putting out. The only problem is when those students graduated with those useless degrees and those really unappealing ideas about work, I always hear this and I hear it more and more. And hopefully it's changing now, but companies don't want to hire these kids coming out of these elite schools that have been sold all this DEI and social justice and all this other stuff. I know I was talking to one young lady in our family. I won't mention who it is, but she was talking about how at her job, one of her coworkers got fired because this 23, 24-year-old went to, what do they call it? Human resources, and demanded a higher salary and stood up for herself and demanded justice for herself. She hadn't been there a year. And I think she was paid something like over $25 an hour for this job. And yet she thought it was an injustice and she was going to stand for justice. Well, they fired her. Like, no, that's not the way it works. That's not even what injustice means. So, hey, Lucas, they're dropping off kids to school. Good to see you. So, what do we say here? Carrie, people don't get that them plans to burn down America to the ground. New World Order is the only thing they are working for. You kind of can't come to any other conclusion. So AC, you like Linda McMahon? Yeah. That's right. She's the wife of Vince McMahon, right? The World Wrestling guy. Interesting pick. But I guess she has a good background in education and she's obviously smart. And I saw her, they were talking about also during the cabinet meeting, Trump, what's this? Let's see. When they get a loan, do they have to explain why they're going to college for? I don't think so. I think it's just free money. What, instead of saying fired her? Yeah, they let her off. She wasn't there anymore. They said goodbye. I think they could come back with the retort to that is no, it would be an injustice for you to demand more than you're worth. We have a part in this too. you know, but that's not the mentality that the Gen Zers have coming out. And it you know, a lot of more and more employees, I won't say most, but more and more companies and employers are saying, we don't want these graduates. They're going to come into our company. They're going to make trouble. It's not worth it. We're going to look at what he said, Hillsdale College or Thomas Aquinas. Pepperdine, he said, Victor Davis Hanson mentioned Pepperdine. I know our daughter visited Pepperdine. I know it's a school through the Church of Christ, which I grew up in actually when I was very young. So I don't know. That's a mainline denomination that has gone. I don't even know if it's around anymore. That it went really progressive too. So I'm not sure Pepperdine, but he mentioned Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Maybe some of these red state schools obviously have really cracked down on the DEI stuff and gotten rid of it. Well, yeah, but I don't know that it is the banks, Gary. You said, I blame the banks. That's like handing out a mortgage to a homeless person. Banks wouldn't do that. The federal government would. So that's where this nationalized student loan thing comes in. I remember Elizabeth Warren and Schumer said, Joe can just sign off the student loans just with this pen and make it all go away. Yeah, that's this kind of magical thinking they have. But it doesn't just go away, does it? So, and maybe this will be one of the things that wakes this generation up and starts to instill in them the Bible verses, the Bible talking about how, the wicked man borrows money and doesn't repay. Okay? And the borrower is slave to the lender. And you have your word to pay back this money is worth more than the money, really, is what the way you have to think of it. Excuse me. So this might be one of the things that turns around this generation of these millennials and Gen Zers, because I'm sure a lot of millennials out there still have the student loan debt that now they're going to have to pay back too. So, and and they didn't ask to be raised this way, okay? But they have been raised this way. This is the participation trophy generation. This is the generation of bulldozer parents and helicopter parents, Disneyland dads, right? And smother mothers, I call them, ones that just, I don't know how many grandparents I've heard. And this is maybe a real problem coming up, because what grandparents tend to do when these kind of things happen, when their grandchildren have student loan debt like this, is to cash in their retirement accounts and pay off. Parents and grandparents are doing this. They pay off their kids' student loans. We have in our extended family, we had a family that did that. They paid off all their kids' student loans, and then they have no money. They didn't have any money to do it, but they did it anyways. Very nice, very loving thing to do in a way, but was also very foolish, and in a way could call it unloving, because you rob these young people of the experience of having to pay back what they borrowed, what they agreed to borrow, and then what they agreed to pay back. And that's not doing them any good. And down the road, when you're old and you don't have enough money to live on, they're probably not going to have much to help you with. And that's just going to be, you're going to be the burden on society. All that work you did. Like I said, in this part of our family, this couple did not have that kind of money. They are really hurting financially now. And if they hadn't done that, they would be in much better shape. And so now they're going to either be a burden on their kids, or, their kids are not going to have the money, or maybe even the desire. I don't know. They're good kids. So I'm sure they'll try their best to take care of them, but they just created a big problem by doing that. So that's kind of the situation now. Like I said, it's going to have to change. The university system is going to have to change. it doesn't have a choice now. Its brand is tarnished. Its days are over, pretty much. Victor Davis Hanson was talking to Mike Rowe, who's one of my favorite guys. He has the Mike Rowe Works Foundation. He's the dirty jobs guy. He's the guy that's probably one of the main, if not the main, movers in this revolution, what Victor called a revolution, because he's been out there for at least a decade, banging the drum on saying, why are we sending these kids to four-year institutions to give them degrees in fields where they can't even get jobs? We're saddling them with all this debt that they're not going to be able to repay. Why are we doing this? Why are we selling this to our children? Why are we sacrificing our children's future for these stupid ideas? And he's put his money and his time and his talent where his mouth is, and he's been giving full scholarships to people to go into trades, electricians, plumbers, HVAC. He always says, if you're addicted to running water and flushing toilets and air conditioning in Phoenix, Arizona, right? If you're addicted to the lights coming on when you flip the switch, then we better start training people in the trades. And I said this, Mike Rowe, yeah. AC's, what do you got, AC? Early on, I pushed my boys to go to college, but then I realized college wasn't for them, and I didn't want them to be in debt. And they're doing just fine. Of course they are. Who says college? My dad, son of a Chicago gangster back in the 1920s, and he went through World War II, got a ship shot out from under him, barely got out, Purple Heart, all that stuff. Not even close to a college education. Really could not read that well. He could read. He taught himself to read well enough, I think. But he had a trade, he had ambition, he had drive, and he made it work. And he started 2 or 3 different companies, built most of the houses in my area that I grew up in LA, had a plastic molding company for 35 years, I think. It's just an outstanding success, and not a day in college. Okay. And that's every bit as legitimate as going to Harvard or Yale or Stanford or whatever. And now it's going to even be even better, because one word Victor Davis Hanson used there was toxic. We always talk about masculinity being toxic, or we don't talk about that. The world does, right? And this worldview, this Marxist worldview, talks about things that are toxic. What's toxic is, one of the things that's toxic is this idea that the more letters you have after your name, somehow the more superior you are. And he said that. He said, I've got so many letters beside my name, PhD, PDQ, LGBT, whatever, all that stuff. There's academic and there's others, right? So I also took printing text. Well, there you go. Yeah. I think we've talked about that, Carrie. Yeah. So college is useless to all who don't need a license. Right. But yet try and tell that to anybody. Try and tell that to Christian parents. My old pastor used to say, we as a society and we as Christians have made an idol of our children's education. You can't tell most parents today not to send their kids to college. Of course, my kid's going to college. Why? So you can saddle them with all kind of debt, so they can go and hear all kinds of things. They can have every Christian value you tried to instill with them challenged and knocked down and driven out of them, beaten out of them. And you're gonna pay for all this. You're gonna put yourself in debt, or you're gonna put your kids in debt. It just doesn't make sense. And yet you can't tell anybody, hardly anybody, that. It's starting to change. Our daughter says this all the time. She gets this. She recently graduated 4 years at a Christian school, did really well, is doing really well. But she said herself, and there were circumstances where she just, through her father's death years ago, and her college was taken care of, and so she had to take advantage of that. But she said, if it wasn't for that, she goes, I wouldn't even have gone to college. I would have just gone to a school and learned a trade. And I would have backed her up on it. Her mom would have had a problem with it, but I would have backed her up on it. So it's a worldview collision, and it is a revolution. And I started paying attention to it about 10 years ago through Mike Rowe. But there's other people joining the bandwagon and joining in on the course, saying their day is done. And plus, with the declining birth rate, which is one thing that colleges have really promoted, either directly or indirectly through all this radical progressiveness that they teach. The more you push this stuff on young people, especially young women, the less they want to have families, the more they want to just get in the workforce and indulge themselves in all that and not have children. So, and that filters into the young men thinking, okay, well, I'd rather not have the burden of supporting children. So, if it's free love, hey, that's great for me too. I don't have that responsibility. Then you have fewer children. So the future of colleges, because of this mindset they've put forth, it's a dead end for them. And they've created that situation too. In the future, their customer base is going to be significantly diminished because of what they've been doing. So it's too bad. I guess I got my Padre hat on, but usually I was telling Michael and Ben when we were talking about this, I'm a walking brand for my school, San Diego State. Part of the reason is because they're named the Aztecs, and I want to make sure someday that's going to change. I'm surprised they've lasted this long. They've already tried to change that, years ago because it's insensitive to the natives. But so I like to have Aztec gear just because I want to make sure I have it. And also it's my school. I went there. It's my sports teams, basically. It's as crazy as all the other schools, all the other California state schools and University of California schools. But hey, it's my school. And back then it was a very worthwhile experience for me to go to college. So it's sad. It really is sad that colleges have had to do this to themselves, or they thought they had to do this to themselves, but they have done it to themselves. And now all the people that bought into it are going to have a rude awakening when these student loans, $1.6 trillion in student loans, and the government is expecting it back. And that's a pretty radical thing, a big bucket of cold water to throw on these young people's faces. And again, it's not really their fault, but at the same time, they're the ones responsible for it. Welcome to the real world, Gen Z, millennials. Sorry we gave you this idea that going to this prestigious college and getting a degree in whatever DEI studies you had was going to be worthwhile. But our bad. Sorry you have to suffer the consequences, because I'm sure some parents and grandparents will bail you out, but they're already pretty much in debt themselves. Okay. If you look at the debt statistics these days. So I don't know where these young people are going to find relief. I would suggest, young people, you change your worldview and not repeat this. Have children and don't repeat this with your children. That's all I could say. So thanks for all the comments. Didn't get to a lot of them because I was ranting. We will wrap it up, and I will see you tomorrow with Ben and maybe Michael. Maybe Michael will make an appearance, and we'll be continuing. I think we're going to be talking about homeschool. So we'll see you then. Everybody take care and have a good weekend. Bye.